There were 3 martini glasses on the bar, but only 2 people standing there. Hers was the middle one, lipstick mark still fresh. She'd left it there when she leaned forward, giggling, pressing her hand flat against his chest like she already forgot she had a husband at this party. That husband was me. I didn't approach right away. I watched. From behind a tall gold centerpiece, shaped like a hurricane lamp. Perfect cover for an unwanted husband whose name nobody remembered at the open bar. She was glowing, eyes wide, her whole body angled toward him, like she wanted him to feel how much she wasn't thinking about me. And the guy? He wasn't shy. He said something low, something smooth. She laughed and tossed her hair, and then she did it. She touched his lapel and slid her hand down to his chest, fingers splayed like she was feeling for a heartbeat. I've never seen her touch me like that in public. A photographer snapped a photo of them right then. The flash reflected off a champagne bucket and momentarily lit up their profiles like a scene in a movie, the kind of scene where the protagonist realizes he's the side character. I didn't blink. I stepped out from behind the decor. I didn't storm up or yell or throw my drink. I just walked forward with the world falling sideways under my shoes. The music was thumping something soulless and upbeat. No one looked at me. Why would they? She leaned in closer, whispering something into the guy's ear. He smiled, then turned, and everything changed. Her face snapped toward his like someone yanked her by the chin. And I swear, she went rigid. Her hand stayed frozen on his chest, fingertips still resting where his heartbeat probably stuttered. Her pupils widened. I saw her lips part just slightly. And then, silence. She pulled her hand back slowly, like she was touching something radioactive. He looked straight at me. No smirk. No panic. Just recognition. And then, he said my name. Loud enough for her to hear. Clear enough to shatter the last thing I believed about my marriage. She took a step back, like gravity had reversed just for her. She almost knocked over one of the martini glasses. I think she muttered my name. Not to greet me, not an apology, but more like a prayer to stop time. He didn't look at her. He only looked at me. And then, without blinking, he said something that made my knees lock and my hands go numb. She didn't know. I didn't know either, not until tonight. That was the first moment I realized I wasn't just losing a wife. I was losing something else, too. But what? I had no idea yet. We drove home in silence. Or, more accurately, she stared out the passenger window while I tried not to shake. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind was still back at that bar, trying to decode the look she gave him when she saw his face. Like it wasn't just surprise, it was fear, maybe even guilt. And worse, recognition. I didn't ask questions right away. I wanted her to speak first. I gave her the space, the silence, the courtesy. But all she gave me was the sound of her nails tapping against her phone screen as she pretended to check messages. Do you know him? I finally asked. My voice cracked halfway through the sentence. She hesitated, and that alone answered more than I wanted to know. No, she said, too quickly. I mean, he looked familiar, but no, it was just, I wasn't expecting anyone like that tonight. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Funny, I said, barely holding it together. He said my name before I even introduced myself. She turned to me then, slowly, her face unreadable, but her eyes were screaming. And for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid of what I might say next. I think he's mistaken, she said. Maybe he knows someone with the same name. You don't know him either, do you? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know him, or at least I used to. And that's what made this entire thing spiral into something darker than I'd ever prepared for. His name was Caleb. 5 years ago, I was assigned to work with him briefly on a shipping logistics contract between our companies. We met maybe 3 or 4 times. He was always slick, professional, a little too smooth for my taste. He made a few offhand comments about marriage I didn't like, jokes about how some women just settle out of boredom. I hadn't thought about him since. But Callie? She said she'd never met him. And yet tonight, she touched him like an old memory. She smiled like she was resuming a conversation. And when she saw his face, she flinched like she'd just seen a ghost with receipts. When we got home, she went straight to the bathroom. She didn't ask if I wanted to talk. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just locked the door behind her and left me alone in the hallway like I was a stranger waiting for a confession that would never come. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. I thought about the way he looked at me, not with arrogance, but with this subtle pity. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he'd been let in on a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. I opened my laptop. Not because I had a plan, but because I had 1,000 questions and nowhere to put them. I searched his name, found his LinkedIn. His company had changed twice since we last spoke, but his profile picture was new, same tailored suits, same cocky posture. Then I noticed something I hadn't expected. His current company? The same one Callie joined 6 months ago. Different departments, sure. But the same office building. Same holiday calendar. Same company retreat she went on in April, the one where she came home tipsy and said it was just hiking and trust falls. I stared at the screen, the timeline unfurling in my mind like a bad dream. She told me she was sharing a room with 2 women. She never said who else was on that trip. I hadn't asked. And now I was asking everything. I scrolled through the retreat photos she'd uploaded to her cloud. Most were blurry shots of forests and group campfires. But in one, barely visible in the background, half hidden behind someone else, I saw his face. Caleb. At her retreat. Not just at the company party. I closed the laptop, heart pounding, palm sweating. She came out of the bathroom 20 minutes later, face washed, makeup gone, robe tied tight like armor. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked calmly, "Was Caleb at your company retreat?" She paused. Too long. I think so. Maybe. I didn't really talk to him. That was her second lie of the night. And I wasn't done digging. Not even close. She fell asleep easily that night, or at least pretended to. I lay next to her staring at the ceiling, my thoughts looping like a broken carousel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her fingers on his chest. The way her expression collapsed when she saw who he was. The way he looked at me like he pitied me. Like I was the last person in the room to catch on. I got up around 3 a.m., careful not to wake her, and walked into the kitchen. I stood in the dark for a while, clutching a glass of water I didn't drink, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator and my own boiling silence. By 3:15, I was back in front of her laptop. She'd left it on the dining table, something she used to never do. Callie was always particular about her electronics. Password protected, locked down. But over the last few months, she'd grown more relaxed about it. Maybe she didn't think I'd care enough to look. Maybe she didn't think I'd notice. But that night, I noticed everything. Her password was still the same. Our old dog's name and the year we got married. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't even know if I'd recognize the truth when I saw it. But within minutes, I was reading her emails, and what I found tore something loose inside me that I haven't been able to put back together. It started with a subject line. Cabin logistics, just you and me? The email was from her work account, dated 2 weeks before the company retreat. The sender, Caleb. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was short. Too short. Got confirmation at you, and I will have the northeast cabin. No awkward roommates. Bring that wine you mentioned. I stared at it like it might change if I refreshed the page. I scrolled down. Callie's reply was there. Perfect. Can't wait. And I'll bring more than wine if you behave. My chest tightened like a fist. I couldn't breathe for a second. I clicked to the thread history. A dozen back and forths. Flirting masked as logistics. References to late-night strategy meetings and inside jokes about her boss thinking they were too professional. Every sentence felt like a jab in the throat. She hadn't just known Caleb, she'd been with him. They planned it. Carefully. Privately. Intimately. She lied right to my face. Twice. I closed the laptop and just sat there. My entire body buzzing with disbelief. This wasn't an emotional affair. This wasn't just texting. This was planned, coordinated, executed. And the worst part? It had been going on right under my nose, while I was folding laundry, making her coffee, paying her portion of the car insurance. I went back to bed around 4:30. I didn't touch her. I didn't look at her. I just stared at the crack in the ceiling plaster and tried to remember the last time she'd kissed me without being distracted. She rolled over at some point and wrapped her arm around me in her sleep. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just lay there, paralyzed under the weight of her betrayal, wondering if she'd done it once, or if this was a pattern stretching back farther than I wanted to know. Morning came. She yawned, stretched, and kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. And I played along. Because now I needed to know everything. If she was going to lie, I'd give her the space to do it, until she couldn't anymore. That night, I set up email forwarding from her work account to mine. It took less than 5 minutes. She'd never see it. And then I waited for her to hand me the knife herself. The first few days after setting up the forwarding felt unbearable. I was living in the same house, eating at the same table, pretending to be the same clueless husband I'd always been, only now, I wasn't clueless. Now, I was just watching her. Carefully. Quietly. Every kiss, every smile, every casual "love you" sounded like a lie auditioning for an award. I started to track everything. When she left, when she got back, what she wore, how she smelled. The excuses she gave for staying late. The sudden silence during our dinners. The way she no longer looked up from her phone when I spoke. All of it became data points in my head, little puzzle pieces I was assembling in private while she lived out her performance as if nothing had changed. And then one afternoon, I got the email. It wasn't from Caleb. It wasn't even to Callie. It was a thread forwarded from someone named Trina, a woman I vaguely remembered from the Christmas party last year. She worked in a different department, I think operations or procurement. The subject line was short, "LMAO, guess who's back?" It was addressed to another coworker, but it had a string of replies attached. In the email chain, Trina wrote, "So Caleb's back and already working his magic on the girls. I swear if he tries it again with Callie, someone needs to warn her husband." The reply from the other woman was even worse. "LMAO again? Pretty sure she was the one who tried it last time. Remember the retreat? She basically disappeared for 2 days. He told Derek she wouldn't leave his cabin." I stopped breathing. I reread it 5 times. Every word landed like a slap across the face. Not only was it true, people knew. They talked about it. My wife wasn't just sneaking around. She was gossip material. A half-hidden joke passed around in office inboxes while I showed up to staff barbecues and smiled like an idiot. I felt my stomach drop. She'd made me a joke, and I hadn't even been invited to the punchline. I printed the thread. I don't know why, some part of me needed to hold it. To see the words on real paper. I tucked it in a book on my nightstand. I don't know what I was saving it for. Maybe evidence. Maybe courage. Later that night, she came home late. Said she got caught in traffic. I didn't ask why she hadn't texted. I didn't say a word. I just handed her a glass of wine and watched her sip it like nothing was wrong. She didn't even blink. She told me about a new campaign she was planning. Something about digital reach and property influencers. But all I heard was noise. I asked, casually, if Caleb had been assigned to her team. She paused just slightly. "No, different department," she said, too quickly. "Why?" I shrugged. "Just wondering." She smiled. "I barely even see him, honestly." That was the 3rd lie. 3 lies in 3 days. And I had the receipts. The next morning, she left early. I waited until she was gone, then checked the email thread again. Trina had added one more message. Also, fun fact. Caleb's not using his company email for certain convos. He's got a private address. Just saying. My heart started pounding. Private email. That meant there was more. Somewhere else. I ran a quick search across her devices. No luck. But then I remembered she had a tablet in her work tote. The one she used to jot down notes during meetings. She left it charging in the kitchen sometimes, usually untouched. I waited 2 hours, then opened it. No password. It took 30 seconds to find the mail app. And there it was. Not Caleb. Someone else. An account labeled Bishop C80. And inside, buried in a folder titled Archive, dozens of messages. Some were from Caleb, but some were from other names I didn't recognize at all. And they weren't recent. Some went back over a year. One of them had a subject line that made my blood run cold. "You promised this wouldn't touch your husband." That's when I realized something that made the pit in my stomach open wider than it ever had before. Caleb wasn't the beginning. He was just the latest chapter. And I was about to find out how far back this betrayal really went. I sat there for hours, scrolling through archived conversations that had no business existing. Not in my house. Not on her tablet. Not in a marriage that I thought foolishly was still ours. The messages weren't all graphic. Some were oddly casual. That was the part that stung most. The normalcy. The way she flirted mid-lunch break with a man who called her green dress, or laughed at inside jokes about cabin lights staying off. The way she sent a photo of our living room, tidy and warm, with the caption, "He just vacuumed." I didn't even ask. God, he tries so hard. That was sent to someone named DH. A contact saved without a full name. I clicked on it. Their first message exchange started 10 months ago, before the retreat, before Caleb came back into the picture. The pattern was clear. She'd start innocently. She'd vent about work, about pressure, about how she didn't feel like herself at home. Then it would shift, compliments, teasing, mentions of hotel conferences. At some point, they dropped all subtlety. "You think he suspects anything?" Not even close. "He's predictable. Sweet. Safe. That's why I married him. That sentence knocked the breath out of me. I wasn't even angry in that moment. I was devastated. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was why. I was her fallback plan, her insurance policy, her safe space when she got bored of the thrill. And she'd been bored a long time. There were other emails. Messages from a man named Jared, a former coworker she'd told me was too flirty to be around. Apparently, not flirty enough to block. There was one from a name I didn't recognize at all, Malcolm_Burns. The conversation was short. But the attachment? A blurry photo of her, in a hotel robe I didn't recognize, holding a wine glass, smiling at the camera in a way she never smiled at me anymore. I wanted to throw the tablet. I didn't. I needed it. I needed to be strategic. I had to know how far this web stretched, how many people had been part of the secret world she built while I was still paying the mortgage and scheduling vet appointments for our dog. She came home that night humming. She had Thai takeout and a new bottle of wine. "You look stressed this morning," she said, setting the bags down. "Thought I'd surprise you." I nodded. My throat was dry. My chest was ice. I helped set the table. I asked about her day. She mentioned meetings and campaign prep and how the team was really clicking lately. Caleb's name never came up. Neither did anyone else. After dinner, she reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "You've been so quiet this week. We okay?" I looked her right in the eye and said, "Yeah, just tired." She smiled and kissed my cheek. That's my steady guy. I went into the garage after she fell asleep and sat on the cold concrete floor. I couldn't cry. I couldn't yell. I just sat there staring at the dark, wondering how long I'd been the fool and how long she'd been this good at lying. But I knew something now. I knew this wasn't about Caleb anymore. He was just a thread in a much larger net. She had made a life where I was the safe option, the base, the background, the steady one who'd be there while she explored things she thought I'd never discover. She didn't know I already had. The next morning, she left for work early. She said she had a meeting at a coworker's condo, some brainstorming session that couldn't happen in the office. That's when I knew I had to act. Not scream, not explode, but document. Build the case. Trace the lies. Step into her world and start flipping the furniture over quietly, methodically, piece by piece. And then, make her see me. Because safe doesn't mean stupid. And I wasn't going to be her background anymore. I didn't even bother pretending to believe her this time. She kissed me goodbye like it was any other Thursday morning and told me she'd be working from Chris's place, that they were finalizing a pitch deck, and it was just easier to work off-site. I nodded, said, "Have a good one." And as soon as her taillights disappeared, I was in my own car, engine running, seatbelt trembling beneath my shaking hands. I knew she wasn't going to any condo for a work session. She never called coworkers by name unless she needed the lie to sound human. But now I was done playing the idiot. I wasn't going to confront her yet, not before I saw it for myself. I needed proof, not just for the world, or her parents, or even a lawyer. For me, I needed to look directly at the lie with my own eyes and feel whatever I needed to feel, no matter how much it hurt. I stayed 3 cars behind, kept my headlights off where I could. She wasn't paying attention anyway. She never suspected I'd follow her. That's the luxury of having a husband you think will always believe you. I watched her take the 405 southbound, then cut off near the harbor. Not the business district. Not any condo I recognized. She pulled into a narrow driveway behind a red brick apartment complex with peeling paint and half a satellite dish dangling from the roof. Hardly the polished, coworker condo she had described. I parked across the street and waited, slouched in my seat, trying not to breathe too loud. She knocked on a door. Someone answered. It wasn't Caleb. It was a different man entirely. Younger, clean-shaven, muscular build under a white undershirt. And she, my wife, leaned in and kissed him on the cheek before stepping inside like she'd done it 100 times. She didn't look nervous or secretive. She looked comfortable, like it was routine. That was the part that messed me up most. The ease of it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I considered getting out of the car. I considered kicking that door down, but I stayed. I told myself I needed more than a hallway kiss. I needed to know who this man was, how he fit into the chain of deceit I'd uncovered, and what else she was hiding beneath that perfect smile she gave everyone else. That's when I noticed the SUV. It had pulled up behind me at some point without me realizing it. Same lane, parked 1 space back. I leaned toward my mirror, tinted windows. No movement, but I could feel it. Someone was inside, and they were watching the same door I was. I didn't move. After 5 minutes, the driver's door cracked open, and a figure stepped out. Female. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Dressed sharp, navy jacket, hair pulled tight, eyes hidden behind sleek sunglasses. She stood there for a moment, hands in her pockets, looking right at the building. She didn't glance at me once. Didn't need to. She was here for the same reason I was. I got out, slowly, cautiously, like I was stretching my legs. She didn't flinch. I made eye contact with her across the pavement and said nothing. She sized me up. Then, to my absolute shock, she nodded once and said, "You're not the only one he's been lying to." I froze. She took a step toward me. "Is your wife in there?" I nodded. She gave the smallest smirk. Figures. And before I could ask her who she was, or what she meant by "he's been lying," she pulled out her phone and opened a photo. It was the same man who had answered the door. Only in this photo, he wasn't kissing Callie. He was standing arm in arm with the woman in front of me. She didn't give me her name. She didn't need to. She just said, "We need to talk. I think we've both been made into fools." And right then, I realized I had no idea what story I was in anymore. Because Callie wasn't the only one with secrets. And this stranger? She was about to help me blow it all open. Her name was Elise. She said it like it carried weight, like I should have heard it before. But I hadn't, not even in passing. Still, I followed her to the cafe around the corner like I was hypnotized. She walked with a sharp, purposeful stride, one that told me she wasn't just here out of heartbreak. She was here on a mission. We sat across from each other in a booth by the window, both of us gripping lukewarm coffee cups neither of us touched. The silence between us was tight, electric. Then she broke it with a single line. "I've been married to Mason for 17 years. That name didn't register at first. Then it hit me, Mason. The man who opened the door for Callie. The man my wife had kissed on the cheek like it was muscle memory. I leaned back, stunned. "Mason's your husband?" I asked, blinking hard. "Soon-to-be ex," she replied, calmly, like she'd practiced saying it. "Yours too, from the looks of it." I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I'd seen Callie walk into that man's apartment like she owned a drawer in his dresser. Elise reached into her bag and pulled out a thick file folder. She placed it gently on the table, slid it toward me. Photos, texts, receipts. I've been collecting them for 3 months. I hired a private investigator when Mason started coming home late from executive dinners that didn't exist. I opened the folder slowly, unsure if I wanted to see what I already suspected. Inside were printed screenshots, time-stamped photos, some of them taken just a week earlier. And then, buried midway down, was a picture that made my stomach seize. Callie and Mason. In a bar. Sitting far too close. Her hand was resting on his knee. His hand? It was wrapped around the back of her neck, pulling her close. The timestamp. The same night she told me she was at a marketing team mixer. The night she came home smiling, a little buzzed, and kissed me like nothing was wrong. "I thought he was just sleeping with someone younger," Elise said, her voice bitter, sharp. "But this has layers. I didn't expect your wife to be the one." I felt a strange heat behind my eyes, not quite tears, just this building pressure of too much all at once. Betrayal has a sound, and it was like white noise between my ears. She told me that guy was a new hire. She acted like she barely knew him. I muttered. "She probably said that to me too," Elise replied. "Thing is, Mason doesn't keep it to one woman. That's why I started tracking him. You're not the only husband getting played, Nathan." I hadn't told her my name. She caught my hesitation and gave me a look. I read her emails. "You're mentioned." Of course I was. The weight of it all started to press down like wet cement. Callie wasn't just having an affair. She was doing it with a man who had already done this to at least one other woman. And from the tone of Elise's voice, maybe even more. But Elise wasn't just angry. She was strategic. "We could burn them," she said quietly. "Together. You get the timeline. I get the closure. We dig until they've got nowhere to hide." "I don't know if I can handle what else I might find," I said. And I meant it. "Too late for that," she replied. "You're already in it." I took the folder. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I couldn't leave it on the table. I couldn't walk away from the truth now that it was sitting in front of me, paper-clipped and sorted by month. When I got home that night, Callie was already there. She was lighting candles in the living room, her hair still wet from a shower. She greeted me with a smile, one that felt like a cheap mask now. "Long day?" she asked. I looked at her. For the first time, I didn't flinch. "You have no idea." She didn't notice the folder tucked under my coat. Didn't notice the storm building behind my quiet. Because I wasn't going to shout. Not yet. I was going to wait until she lied one more time, and then I put the entire house of cards in her lap and asked her to read it out loud. She lied one more time. It happened 2 nights after Elise handed me the folder. We were sitting on the couch, a romantic movie playing low in the background. Callie had poured wine, lit candles, even cooked, something she hadn't done in weeks. It was the kind of night that, years ago, would have felt intimate, safe, whole. Now it felt like a stage set. And I was waiting for the final scene. She curled up next to me, tracing circles on my arm with her fingertip, and said, "You know that meeting at Chris's place? It actually got rescheduled last minute. We ended up doing it over Zoom." I stayed at the office. My heart didn't race this time. I didn't clench my fists. I just looked at her and said, softly, "You sure you want to go with that version?" She blinked, pulled back slightly. "What do you mean?" I reached down, pulled the folder out from under the coffee table, and handed it to her. She stared at it like it was radioactive. Her hand trembled as she opened the flap. And then silence. No gasp. No denial. Just that awful sound of truth being read in your own handwriting. Emails. Photos. Dates. Names. She didn't cry. Instead, she set the folder down, folded her hands in her lap, and whispered, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." I almost laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. That was her concern? The method of discovery? How long? I asked. She paused. "Mason? For months. The others? I don't even know anymore." Honesty, at last. Brutal, jagged honesty. But it came too late. I would have forgiven a mistake, I said. Even a one-time thing. But this? This was a life you built behind mine. She looked down, ashamed for once. Not defensive. Not cold. Just tired. "I didn't think you'd ever leave," she whispered. "You were always just there. Solid. Predictable. Kind. You married me because you thought I was safe," I said. "And you thought safe meant stupid." "I never said that." "You didn't have to." I stood up and walked to the bookshelf, pulled down the small envelope I'd hidden days ago. Inside were printed copies of the key emails, copies of the condo lease she never told me about, and a letter I'd written the night after I followed her. I handed it to her. "I'm not going to scream," I said. "I'm not going to throw anything. But I'm going to ask you to leave." Her eyes filled, finally, with tears. "Nathan, I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your wallpaper. And I refuse to spend another day pretending you're still the woman I married." She begged at first, promised to do therapy, asked for one more chance. But I didn't budge. I was done giving her space to breathe while I suffocated. 3 weeks later, she moved out. Quietly, without fanfare. The kind of exit you don't take pictures of. She left her keys on the kitchen counter beside a note that simply read, "I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you'll be okay." That was generous of her. Because as it turns out, I already was. It's been 6 months since that night. I've taken up hiking. I started seeing a therapist, finally facing the deeper cracks I'd ignored. Elise and I still talk, not romantically, but like survivors who met in the same storm. Strangely, she helped me more than anyone. And most importantly, I learned that being safe isn't a weakness. It's a strength. I didn't lie. I didn't cheat. I didn't destroy the one person who trusted me most. She did. And now, I live without lies. I wake up in a quiet house filled with honesty. And someday, maybe not yet, I'll build something new. With someone who doesn't see kindness as weakness. Because I finally see myself clearly now. And I'm not invisible anymore.